Hello everyone, welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Third Sector Insight in partnership with TPXimpact. Today we're going to be talking about some of the findings from our recent co-produced survey and what the next steps are for charities who are setting out on their digital transformation journeys. Our survey revealed that while 70% of respondents have a digital roadmap in place, they don't always feel they have the right tools and skills to meet their goals. So where do we go from here? I'm Jennifer Jackson, contributing editor for Third Sector Insight, and I'm joined today by some brilliant speakers who are here to share their different perspectives and expertise on this topic. First up, we have Zoe Amar, Director of Zoe Amar Digital. Zoe, you're a familiar face to our regular audience, but would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here today. Exactly as Jennifer said, I run Zoe Amar Digital, we're a consultancy that supports other charities with digital transformation. I'm also chair of the Charity Digital Code of Practice, and I'm a trustee at Charity Digital Trust.
Thanks, Zoe. And we're also going to be hearing from David Hunt, Associate Director, Digital and Strategic Insight at Breast Cancer Now. David, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yes, hello everyone. David Hunt from Breast Cancer Now. So I've been with the organisation for about 5 years. I head up the Digital and Strategic Insight team, and that covers digital marketing and social media, online communities, digital product and content, and also our digital transformation project, which we'll be talking about a bit more later.
Brilliant, thanks David. And we also have Louise Lai, who's Chief Client and Transformation Officer for Digital Experience Division at TPXimpact with us today. Louise, could you briefly introduce yourself, please?
Amazing. Thank you, Jennifer. Yeah, so happy to be here. And sorry, that was quite a long title and explanation of my role. I'm from TPXimpact, and we are super excited to have partnered with Third Sector Insights on this piece of thought leadership. So I am so lucky enough to work with lots of amazing organisations in and around the for good space, kind of overseeing client strategy and supporting them on their transformation journey, which is why this piece of work is really, really important for our sector. I also run a mentoring community for women in and around the for good space and sit on the board of trustees at Blood Cancer UK. So it's safe to say I'm really passionate about change and transformation in our sector.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Louise. Our panelists are also going to be taking your questions on all things transformation. So if you do have any questions as we go along, please do send them in the comment box underneath the video, and I'll be asking them towards the end of the session. If you've got a particular question for someone in particular on the panel, please just mention that so I know who to direct them to. We do also have a couple of poll questions running, which you may have seen already, so please do take part in those. The questions are: where is your organisation on its digital transformation journey? And are you encouraged to grow and learn in your current role? You've got some multiple choice answers there to choose from, so I'll be announcing them shortly. So let's get started with our main discussion now. We were keen to do a temperature check of where organisations are on their digital transformation journeys. And according to our survey, 40% said technology is already a key element in their organisation's strategy. But 39% said tech was only moderately important, and 18% said it was only somewhat considered. Now that feedback, it would suggest there's still some way to go for many charities. So how would you recommend organisations go about making tech a key element of their strategy? And what areas should they focus on when getting started? Zoe, can I come to you first on that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear those soundings from the survey. It's fascinating. So there are 3 things I would recommend charities focus on. The bedrock of any decisions that you make should absolutely be about having that real confidence, that evidence based on what your users want. So talking to them through things like user interviews, surveys, making sure that you're testing, learning and improving what you're doing and really thoroughly involving those users in the testing process is vital for deciding what to prioritise. So that's the first thing I'd focus on. The second thing is very much about developing a vision and what success really looks like for digital transformation? And people often find that quite a difficult question to answer. But I would say go back to the vision in your latest strategy or your latest business plan. What are you aiming to do, and how can digital help you increase your impact and achieve those goals? So think about what success really looks like. And the third thing, and this is a very common thing I'm seeing across the sector right now, is we have to tackle this issue of what I would call digital growing pains. I'm talking to so many charities at the moment where they've done fantastic work around innovating or even just trying new things, like developing more digital services during the pandemic. And then now we're at the stage where they want to do more, or they want to prioritise more. And there's this sense of, well, how can we do this better? And we've noticed some inefficiencies there about the way these teams are working together. How can we improve it? So I think going back to reviewing what you've done, what's gone well, what could be improved, and then identifying really clearly the actions for how you're going to get to that next stage with digital, that all important phase 2 of your transformation, is vital for growth and increasing your impact.
Great. Thanks, Zoe. What do you think, Louise? Have you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, definitely. I guess I'm probably going to lean into a couple of bits that Zoe picked up there. So the first one is around sort of the vision and mission. What is your organizational strategy? And I think historically, when organizations have been thinking about digital and technology, it's sort of seen as an underlying hygiene enabler. It's not something that's crucial. It's at the heart of everything. It's just something that sits along the bottom of a strategic, say, canvas or pyramid. And what we're seeing now with organizations, and we do touch upon this in the findings piece with some recent work with Louise Lai, Director of Strategy at UNICEF UK, and their team, is really elevating technology, ways of working, tools as part of your organizational strategy. It's just as vital to really think about how those things are going to help you deliver impact, achieve your outcomes, and be at the heart of everything that you're doing. So really thinking about it as something more than just the add-on to what you need to do. And so that's definitely been a big shift that we've seen more recently with organizations. So I guess to Zoe's point, and then I guess picking up a little bit around sort of the ways of working, what is the gap that you want to close? Like, where are you now? Do you have the tools? Really thinking about the pathway to achieving your vision with the sort of digital tools or the ways of working that are going to sort of elevate and accelerate your pathway towards it.
Great, thanks for that, Louise. David, Breast Cancer Now, what are your experiences? What kind of advice could you share from your experiences there?
Yeah, so just nicely following on from what's been said just now, Breast Cancer Now, our Turning the Tide strategy comprises 5 strategic objectives to drive us towards our ultimate vision. But across those objectives, the 4 accelerators: amplifying the voice of experience, unlocking the power of community, evolving and adapting our practices, and generating further funding. And that third one, evolving and adapting our practices, has a specific focus about identifying and implementing new technologies to support and enhance team working, inclusion, creativity, and innovation. So rather than a separate, distinct thing, by positioning tech as an accelerator for all areas of our work, for all teams to own, we have an organizational wide mandate, ratified by trustees for tech to be a key element of achieving our vision.
Lovely. Thanks, David. I think we're all aware of the scale of change across the third sector in recent years, and a lot of charities have already started adopting new technology and committing resources into their digital transformations, haven't they? But for those that still haven't started that journey, can you talk a bit about the benefits of using data to become more audience driven, and how perhaps digitally enabled processes can actually help organizations to increase capacity? David, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'll have to go into a little bit of backstory, really. So at Breast Cancer Now, we've embarked on an ambitious digital unification and transformation project, which we began in September 2021 in partnership with TPXimpact and generously supported by players of the People's Postcode Lottery. Historically, aside from our main website, which houses our extensive health information, details about the support service we offer and research we fund, and all the usual fundraising opportunities, we also have a number of separate websites, which can include our online support forum, for example, donation, pay-in and event registration platform, lottery and raffle microsites, and various other subsites. However, none of these are directly integrated into our CRM, nor with each other, meaning the user has a sort of disparate and inconsistent user experience as they move from platform to platform within the Breast Cancer Now experience. So I wanted to draw a line under this, vastly improve the user experience, as well as transform the charity's internal processes and uses of APIs and automation. From the user perspective, they should feel like they are on one seamless platform, one that knows who they are and what content is most relevant to them. So whoever they are and whatever their relationship with Breast Cancer Now is a place to come. That's our North Star for this project. So we've drawn on the data that we have together with a deep discovery dive to develop a set of experience principles that underpin everything we do in the development of the new platform. And these include things like help me inform myself, introduce me to depth and detail gradually, and guide me through processes. And we've got about 7 of those. And tech-wise, we're introducing better use of API integrations to connect different systems to each other and to our CRM in the background. So while we might now have a headless setup of separate tech and services solving different problems, such as content delivery, site search, web forms, forum, e-commerce, donation, event registration, so on, the data will flow between these, so users don't have to enter the same information over and over, and modularized content can be shared across these solutions. By evolving to introduce API-based and other automations, we're increasing capacity of teams as well as reducing risk. And we're also solving age-old problems such as image governance by integrating with our central digital asset management platform. So any images used on the website will respect usage rights and expiration dates, rather than uploading images to a CMS media library and losing that metadata. In the future, we'll be able to enhance the experience by using what we know about users and our experience and expertise to offer personalized behavior-led content. And by running the project using agile methods, we're able to incorporate user testing and feedback throughout. So it's an iterative process.
Great, thanks, David. Louise, what do you think in terms of those who still haven't started their journeys? Can you tell us about the benefits of using data to become more audience-driven?
Yeah, sure, and I'll build on a lot of what David has said. You know, it's also thinking about what data means for your culture and ways of working as much as it is around your digital ecosystem and your tech stack. So really, I guess, getting an understanding of your audience truths. You know, what do you actually know, and is that proven, or is that, you know, an assumption? Is that a hypothesis? What are the gaps that you might have? And through experimentation, prioritization, you can start to build a really rich picture of your audience needs and use that data to iterate those experiences, exactly as David was saying. And, you know, part of that is in the digital world, so we're thinking about digital experiences, but, you know, as our behaviors evolve as individuals and our needs with organizations, you know, how do we continue to bridge the gap between the physical world and their experiences versus the digital space, and really thinking about that. As David mentioned with Breast Cancer Now, so having experience principles as a North Star means it gives us something really, really clear to kind of aim for and hold ourselves to account to as well, in terms of the decisions that we make, the things that we prioritize, so that, you know, in particular for Breast Cancer Now, you know, they are the go-to organization for people that are affected by breast cancer, and that we can give them a really, you know, in some cases life-changing experience by giving them the information or the content that they really need. So part of, I think, living those experience principles is being able to draw parallels between the decisions we make within, say, the digital ecosystem. So that might be functionality that we decide to prioritize within, say, a CMS, or the content that we sort of create, and the medium that we might choose to sort of bring that to life. You know, the data that we're capturing means that we can kind of meet those needs, and we can draw the parallel right back to, actually, we made the decision, this is why we did what we did, and this is how it's meeting that audience need. And then I think there's a whole other, I mean, it's probably another webinar, but kind of, are we trusted with that data? You know, privacy, data capture, you know, that's such a big topic, and it's so important for lots of audiences. So being really clear about what we're capturing, why we're capturing it, how we're using it, and that we can be trusted with that data. And then you sort of, David touched on it around sort of headlesses, you know, this is where the technology solution design is really, really important, around connecting the different parts of the ecosystem, so that the data kind of helps improve and gives a really meaningful experience for those users and audiences.
Great, thanks, Louise. And Zoe, I could see you nodding there. Do you have anything to add to that?
I love the way that David and Louise have talked about some of that culture change that's involved in using data more effectively. And I think from both of those examples, it's really interesting to think about the journey that different organisations will have to go on. And sometimes what I find with boards in particular is that they can be slightly nervous taking those more data-driven decisions, even though it's absolutely the right way to go. So it might be worth spending some time as part of how you set up that process of gathering the data, looking at the goals that you are working to, which I think both Louise and David have discussed brilliantly, is thinking about how you then feed that data through to the decisions that the board need to make and how it can actually inform the organisational strategy as well. And I've seen charities who've really joined the dots on that, and it's been not just a brilliant way to make better decisions, but also to help boards really understand the value of digital and some of that great real-time data that comes through. So that may also be something to consider as well.
Brilliant, thank you, Zoe. Well, that brings us quite nicely to our poll results, which I'd like to announce to you now, and we'll have a look at what you think on the panel about them. So where is your organisation on its digital transformation journey? 12% of you said we don't currently have any plans for digital transformation. 19% say we'd like to make the move towards digitalising processes, but no plans currently. We have 41%, we have a digital transformation plan that we're currently working on. 21%, we have a plan and are partway through implementing it. 7% fully digitalised. 7% of you only say we are fully digitalised. What do our panelists think of that? So 41%, we have a digital transformation plan currently working on. Some interesting findings there. I don't know, is this a surprise? Zoe, what do you think?
It's a really interesting one. I mean, I suppose for an event like this, it's no surprise that we would have a lot of responses clustered around having a plan or already being in the act of implementing a plan, which I think is great. I think what I'd love to know a bit more about, and maybe this is something we can come on to in the discussion later, is the barriers for the charities who perhaps don't have any plans for digital transformation or would like to make the move towards digitisation but don't have plans currently, because it'd be great to look at what we can do to help people move forward as part of this session.
Great, thanks Zoe. Louise, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, similar. I think sort of, I guess, as Zoe mentioned, not a surprise in terms of the audience and how we've obviously sort of programmed this piece of content. I think in terms of the gaps that people might have, to your point, Zoe, I think it'd be really interesting to dig into that. And also, I guess, is there a part within the sector around sort of demystifying digital technology transformation, like, you know, as words, as statements, you know, as someone who has that in the job title, I can see how that might be quite daunting for organizations, and actually sort of simplifying it around like, what does it mean for your organization? Because, you know, it's so personal to your organization in terms of your maturity, your skills, also where your audiences or users are, you know, kind of really aligning your digital kind of transformation kind of priorities and vision with actually where you're meeting the need with digital and technology as well. So it'd be really interesting to dig into that a bit later in the Q&A if we can.
Yeah, sure. And David, did you have any thoughts on those responses?
I thought it was really encouraging that you know, majority either have a plan or are working through a plan or are fully digitized. I thought that was a good result to see. And like the others have said, I think it would be great to understand what the different interpretations of digital transformation are when the questions are being answered, and digging into those a bit more would be really interesting, because I'm not sure there's a universal definition of what we're talking about.
Sure. And interestingly enough, we've actually just had a question through, which it might be worth exploring here. Can someone please define digital transformation plan? So, I mean, that's the challenge, isn't it? But does anyone want to have a go at giving it some sort of definition? Zoe, do you want to answer that at this point? Or?
Yeah, sure. So I think digital transformation is really about how you increase your impact through using digital as an organisation, and also how you how you create value as well. And that might be in terms of increased fundraising income. It might be bringing in more valuable partnerships. It might even be through something like the IP you create in how you develop innovative products and services. So I do want to stress, I think that value comes in lots of different forms. And then the third element of it for me is that it does need to be about creating competitive advantage. And I know that can feel like a bit of a tough thing to talk about sometimes in the charity sector, but I do think it's important to look at where there are alternative choices out there, other places, even other organisations or networks who are not charities, that the people you're trying to reach might go to, and where you might actually be able to partner with them if you're trying to do the same kind of thing, and also where you can make it really clear to people how you can help them and how digital can enhance what you're doing to simplify choice.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Zoe. And on that, while we're on this topic, because it was one of the responses to the poll about being fully digitalised, only 7%, someone wants to know, I'd be interested to know what fully digitalised means. Does it mean when the whole organisation's cultures have shifted to work in more digital ways? That could be a short answer, but Louise, do you want to have a go at that one?
Yeah, sure. And again, I think it's each organisation is going to be different in terms of what fully digitised means to them. But I think it's around sort of digital first. So really thinking about, I guess, to sort of lean into what Zoe was sort of identifying there is, what's the impact that you're trying to deliver? Like, how can digital help transform those experiences or the services or the needs that you're trying to meet as an organisation? So it's really thinking about that connection between digital first and the impact, and being able to sort of clearly connect the measurement of that impact through to the sort of digital technology kind of position that you might be using to kind of solve those and achieve that impact. And then I think it's around having a really good understanding of your ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, I don't actually just mean digital or technology ecosystem. I mean how you exist within kind of your competitors, with partners, with governments, with other sectors, really kind of having a much broader, I guess, understanding of where you sit in that sort of ecosystem. And that, gets us more into a space of being a modern organisation and thinking about that as a charity.
Great, thanks, Louise. I hope that answers our audience's questions. And the other question we had on the poll, are you encouraged to grow and learn in your current role? 6% said I'm not encouraged and I'm unable to pursue this independently. 24% say I'm not encouraged, but I am able to pursue this on my own. And 19% I am encouraged occasionally. And 51% say I am often encouraged to learn and grow. So what does our panel think of that? David, how does that compare with your expectations, or perhaps how you feel things are in your organisation?
Again, really encouraging, and I'm not surprised to see the vast majority at least encouraged to grow and learn in their current role, although unfortunately quite a significant number of people aren't able to pursue it on their own. It's certainly at Breast Cancer Now, we have a really strong mandate of learning and development, and we've invested a lot in online platforms that allow us to do that. And as line managers, we encourage our teams to dedicate time to that. And I don't think I've ever said no to a member of my team attending a conference or a workshop. And we find the resources to make that happen. But internally, we have a lot of resources now available. We've partnered with LinkedIn Learning as well to provide a lot of resources for colleagues to upskill in the areas that are important to their role.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Any more reactions from our panel to that poll question? Louise, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, similar to David, I guess within our organisation, it's exactly the same. So it's around people having the sort of encouragement and environment and culture to evolve, to self-develop, and also given the headspace, when you're juggling lots of priorities and your context switching quite a lot, is making sure that we're providing the space and stimulus for people to want to learn more. So we have a culture of working out in the open. We do lots of show and tell. So, this is stuff that we just do internally, where we can kind of, share everything that we learned about something, so that other people can kind of learn from those experiences, as well as doing them sort of in collaboration with, people like David and our other clients, kind of sharing with the sector, kind of here's some things that we've learned. And so really kind of that's a key part of our sort of culture is really promoting that space to learn and to do better, and to be really curious. Like, nothing's set in stone, like things can change, things can iterate. And this is where you sort of lean into more deeply the sort of the cultural change and the sort of ways of working that we talk around in terms of sort of digital and technology, is that nothing is ever fixed. Things evolve, things move quickly in certain spaces, particularly in digital technology. So how do we kind of support that learning and that continuous kind of building of knowledge? So it's about sort of creating that shared space and using kind of parts of our ways of working to make sure that kind of any learning is cross-pollinated as much as possible within the organisation.
Thanks, Louise. And Zoe, what did you think of those results?
Yeah, what it reminds me of is something someone said to me a while ago about how a truly digital organisation is a learning organisation. And I really like those points that Lou and David have made there about really approaching digital as a big learning challenge, because that way I think it becomes a lot less intimidating. So yeah, I think that's a great approach that has to be embedded actually in how you are approaching digital transformation.
Great. Well, thank you, Louise and Zoe and David, for your reactions to those polls, and thank you to the audience for taking part. So just moving on with our discussion now. According to our survey, 57% of respondents said that agility was the most important aspect for third sector organisations so that they can achieve their operational goals. So if charities are supposed to realise their full potential, how do they go about adopting more agile methods for planning and delivery? Louise, can I come to you first on that?
Yes, brilliant. And completely agree. I think the overarching thing here is around getting more comfortable and used to change. I feel like I mentioned this phrase kind of just before, but nothing is set in stone, and that's a mindset shift for lots of us. And I think it was definitely accelerated during the pandemic. But it's being able to be slightly more comfortable in grey or abstract sort of ways of planning. Doesn't mean that you don't have like an outcome, an objective, a thing that you're trying to achieve, but that nothing is ever static in our sort of sector anymore. And I think digital and technology is such a huge catalyst for some of those things. And it was something that really inspired part of the thinking with this sort of leadership piece, is that we've seen unprecedented pressures on the sector, and in some cases that has meant restructures, but structure alone isn't going to make all the difference to organisations. The ability to adapt quickly, to increase your maturity in particular areas of your organisation, be that digital or technology, it's about setting yourself up to be a responsive organisation. And that's been such a key part of the disruption, I think, that we've seen in the last couple of years within the not-for-profit space. So we talk about being intentionally responsive with organisations, and that has to flow through strategy, planning, governance, decision making. And I guess I'm going to talk about it now because Zoe, you mentioned it around governance. And when we think about charity governance, like actually what we're talking about is decision making forums, boards of trustees. So how do you kind of create an environment and a governance structure that allows you to be more agile in your decision making, your prioritization? That's a journey that organizations need to go on, particularly not for profits, when also there are just legal requirements of being a registered charity that you need to navigate. But it really is around that intentional responsiveness in decision making and delivering against your outcomes. Like, what are the outcomes? What's the impact you're trying to achieve? And making sure that you're set up to be agile and respond when things are changing. And when we say things are changing, you know, data insights, there'll be stuff that's happening that will show you something needs to kind of change within your organization, or a behavior or a need has changed within kind of the audiences that are supporting you or volunteering for you, or that you're kind of, you know, providing services for. And it's about being able to kind of make the decisions based on that, and that your governance and way of like budgeting and decision making kind of supports that. So for me, like that's could be a big game changer for the sector, being intentionally responsive in how you're set up.
Thanks, Louise. What do you think, David?
Yeah, I think one of the real benefits to Agile is you build this real sense of momentum by delivering tangible outputs at the end of each sprint. People involved in the project can see progress, and the flexibility of sprints allows projects, particularly large-scale projects which rely on lots of teams inputting. You can more easily fit around busy schedules by being able to reorder the backlog. But I think on a practical sense, I don't think people should worry about getting it wrong or doing Agile wrong. I think if you're interested in adopting those methods, you should just try and start it, and the underlying principles are quite straightforward to understand. And if you find a small scale project that you can work on with like-minded people within the organization, then that alone will kickstart sort of the interest in that. So I don't think you should wait for big opportunities and necessarily have an organizational wide mandate to switch to Agile overnight. I think if you start small, then you can grow the understanding of it across the organization.
Thanks, David. And Zoe?
That point about starting small, I think, is a really good one, especially for any boards who might be a bit nervous about getting going with Agile. And I think for me, where I've seen it work really well in practice, it's where you obviously have those universal principles around it that Louise mentioned, and also where teams have a bit of flexibility to make it their own. So I remember talking to a director of services in quite a big charity recently, where that person was getting a bit frustrated with people in the safeguarding team because they obviously had a very different approach to Agile. And in fact, I think the safeguarding team probably needed to have a bit more of a cautionary approach. So I think definitely having some universally defined and applied principles is really important. And I think that is a more accessible way in than taking a methodology wholesale, which is where I've seen that go slightly wrong. And I know that's not what Louise or Dave was saying. I'm just completely supporting what they're talking about, those universal principles. I think it's a cracking idea.
Almost 60% of respondents to our survey said they didn't feel like they had the tools or the resources or capacity to achieve their goals at the moment. So how important is it that employees are given the time and the tools to upskill? And I've seen a few comments come through as well from our audience expressing this same issue. So how can organisations go about building a culture of empowerment, collaboration and autonomy among their staff? Zoe, I'd like to come to you first on that.
Sure, yes, absolutely. And I think we've actually seen as well in various surveys with employees over the years that actually if you don't get those learning opportunities and also the tools right, people will leave. So absolutely, I think there is an imperative to really make sure we're doing this in the right way. And not only that, and again, I'm thinking about how people can best make these arguments up to boards and senior management. What I've seen in practice, and I'm sure many other people will have today as well, is that if you don't give people the right tools and skills, it's a real drag on productivity, it's a big drag on revenue, and of course, impact as well. So one place I always recommend people begin is getting a baseline of digital skills. And you can do this yourself. You can run some kind of just internal digital skills survey. And the reason why I think that's important is to begin to identify some of those warm and cold spots across your organisation. So where there are areas of lack of confidence, lack of skills in particular teams, and where there may also be some areas where people are really good at certain aspects of digital, but just haven't been given a chance or empowered to use those skills as part of their job. And then what I do is identify what those gaps are for the short, medium and long term that you might need to close. So for example, yesterday I was talking to a charity who are getting a bit worried that they haven't perhaps invested in the potential around streaming for fundraising. So they know they need to grow skills in that area, because otherwise they're going to miss out on opportunities around income as well. And then just moving on to tools, and I know we were talking about the growing pains of charities and the role of digital within that a little while back. I think it's so important as part of looking at your tech stack and the tools you're currently using to agree what the purpose of those tools is and the parameters for staff to use them. And that sounds very prescriptive, but for me, it's very much about clarifying, well, why do we have all these things? Do we need less things? What are we going to use them for? And also where we want to keep empowering staff to learn and to give them a feedback loop so they can continue to share with the rest of the organisation where these things are working and where they may not be working as well. And then to reinforce that, I think it's great if we can encourage managers to take a bit more of a coaching style approach so that they're empowering their reports to go and use these tools, use their skills to solve problems.
Great, thanks Zoe. Lots of great advice there for everybody. Louise, do you have any advice to share on that as well?
Yeah, and I think kind of building on what Zoe was saying there, when we get into the nitty gritty of kind of tools, it is about that skills, it's about the confidence levels, and we've done lots of this kind of these kinds of audits with organisations to help them, but also thinking about the cost as well, the level of investment, because there are different types of tools. Exactly to Zoe's point, there's some really great like frameworks that you can use around like the purpose, and depending on the purpose will also kind of influence the longevity likelihood of that tool, so how much you should invest. So if something's quite fast moving, quite new, then signing up to like a 5-year license might not be the best use. So really thinking about how mature that purpose of the tool is within your organization. Again, this sort of comes back to maybe the learning aspect that we covered earlier in the session, was around sort of creating forums, centers of excellence. What's the change and shared learning we could sort of spread across the wider organization. It's not about training everyone, but you could have pockets of champions or masterclasses or centers of excellence that really help kind of showcase the power of the different tools that you might use in your organization. So I think that's definitely sort of one level of kind of the practicality of just having the right tools, like you said. So we need stuff that's going to make our teams' lives easier. What are the blockers that we need to move out of their way? And then for me, there's also something around leadership. And I know, Zoe, you mentioned around sort of that coaching kind of supporting team. For me, empowerment and autonomy are also byproducts of good leadership, of clear boundaries, of people knowing where they can make decisions when they're using different tools and the outcomes of those things, and making sure that there's no areas of grey or confusion for people, really kind of empowering them to be able to make decisions, use the information they have, and be empowered to use the tools that are right for them, and kind of iterate and share if they're working, and if they're not, everyone in the organization kind of understands that that's what they've been trying to do. So I think you kind of have to think of it through two lenses of literally the practical tools and the processes and the things you need, and then how are we creating that culture and leading our teams through the effective use of those tools.
Brilliant, thank you so much, Louise. Now we are getting loads of questions come through from our audience, so we will try to answer as many as we can. First one I want to ask is, should charities consider recruiting people from outside the sector, the third sector, but with clear transferable skills? David, what would you say?
I would say that's a firm yes. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't draw on the skills that people have developed outside the charity sector. I think there's a wealth of transferable skills, be they project management or collaboration, or specific skills in digital marketing or product management. I think it would be very short-sighted to require charity experience for when you're recruiting, particularly at a time when there is I think a sector-wide issue with recruitment that we're seeing. So anything we can do to pull in talent from any areas would be a benefit to the charity sector as a whole.
Great, thank you very much, David. Let's look at some more questions. So how can employees learn to do things for themselves? That was one of the things in the poll, independently learning. Louise, do you have any tips there?
Yeah, and I know I mentioned it before, but communities of practice that we use, it gives teams capabilities, the forum to share best practice, to challenge each other, to innovate, to crowdsource around like a problem or an opportunity, and with a live project that you might be doing with one of your clients or your briefs. It's something that very much exists in the digital and technology spaces, but I think can be applied more broadly, be that within an organisation or within in a network. And I would say that the not-for-profit sector is really good at kind of mobilizing and crowdsourcing and making connections. How could you sort of formalize that? And then as a mentor, I'm pretty biased, but really thinking about also, what's that informal mentoring or coaching that you might sort of need within your role, and really thinking about, making the business case for your organization to support you. Because I think, that's really going to add value to the organisation, because they're going to be supporting you as an employee to really I guess make the most of your role and kind of push yourself and kind of develop your own skills. So for me, there's a side of, yeah, absolutely learn to do things for yourself, but acknowledge that there might be cases where formal kind of coaching or mentoring might help you identify the things that you can't see, or show you the art of the possible within kind of a career path or your role that you're delivering at the moment.
Lovely, thank you, Louise. Now we've got another question through. How can charities with scarce human, time and financial resources improve their evaluation and construct an efficient baseline to work from? Is there a really user-friendly tool to avoid the paper and time burden and cater for all users? David, do you have any advice there, any tools that you can talk about?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure this is what the question is getting at, but there are tools like the NCVO Digital Maturity Matrix, which allows you to build up a baseline of where you are as an organization digitally, and it's slightly subjective, but allows you to at least have a baseline where you can then see where your areas are that you need to improve on, and give you some advice about how to actually invest in those areas, be that time as well as money. So I think that would be a good place to start.
Thanks, David. Zoe, do you have any tips or any tools or anything?
Yeah, I think the Maturity Matrix is a brilliant tool. I'm also going to big up the Charity Digital Code of Practice as well. I think that's quite good for things benchmarking, particularly with your senior management team. I know we had another question about that as well. But yeah, there's loads of really brilliant tools out there that you can use to get a sense of where you're at. I mean, obviously the key thing with any of these tools is to really commit to a plan of action once you've got the data from them. And that's where I think that involvement with your senior management team is so key.
Thanks, Zoe. And Louise?
Yeah, so as sort of David mentioned, there's sort of the maturity matrix, and some of the kind of really helpful tools that we use is like a business model canvas. So if you're really thinking about, what should we focus on, what is our organizational priority, then the business model canvas, which actually we iterated to be a sort of charity model canvas a couple of years ago in partnership with some other people in the sector, kind of really gives you that sort of template, that on a page, what is it we're trying to achieve, who are the users, what are the needs that we're meeting, but also what's our USP as an organisation, like why would they come to us as a not-for-profit to sort of meet their needs or deliver those services. So yeah, there's some really sort of helpful free tools out there that we can definitely be making the most of in the sector, and hopefully forums like this mean that people find out about them more, and we all share them in a much more open source way.
Great, thank you. Now on to some more questions. So let's see. Where should strategic ownership of the charity's digital vision and strategy sit? Is it better driven from a corporate or transformational team rather than a service delivery or marketing team? Any thoughts there? How does it work at Breast Cancer Now, David?
So my team does sit within the fundraising and comms directorate, but we do work very closely with the services teams and research and influencing teams. So where we sit is not the be all and end all of the remit that we have. So I think you can overcome those organizational structure situations by working collaboratively with the SLT and your peers across the organization to deliver whatever digital support is needed for the organization, underpinned by the organizational strategy.
Thanks, David. Any more thoughts from our panel? Louise, do you have any thoughts on that?
I guess to echo David's point, in terms of where it sits is kind of not the focus. I think it's around, what do you mean by digital? What is the role that it has to play within your organizational strategy? And then it's kind of mobilizing that within the sort of wider organization and how that sort of is attached to their outcomes. I think that to me is the most important part of where the digital vision and strategy sits. It sits embedded within everything else that the organisation is trying to achieve, for me, and it's in its most simplest form.
Thanks, Louise. Zoe, any other thoughts there?
I guess logically that vision is going to be held by whoever's leading on digital. At the same time, I think it's also really important that your trustees and your senior management team feel that they have a stake in it and to understand where they can influence it as well. So I think it's really important that it's seen as a shared opportunity and needs to be framed in that way.
Great, thanks, Zoe. So there's a question here from a small charity. We're a very small charity of 3. And we want or need to embrace digital transformation due to expansion. Where can we get the funding from for this to ensure our existing funds are still directed to our beneficiaries? Do any of you have any thoughts on that? Louise, what do you think?
Yeah, and actually it's an example that was shared with me by Julie Wilson-Dodd, one of the contributors to the report when we were talking about her experience at Parkinson's UK, that actually there were sort of funding opportunities for, I guess we'd call them, say, major donors, but actually kind of making the case for funders in supporting your way of working. So it's not your traditional, okay, we're going to deliver services. Actually, we're going to try and pioneer a different way of working and delivering those services. So ultimately, our impact is going to be greater, but it's a slightly different proposition. I think there's no reason that within our sector we can't sort of make the case for support and see if there is appetite within sort of the normal, I guess, traditional funding streams where people expect to pay for a certain thing or a certain output. Actually, what we're talking about is funding and supporting initiatives that help you deliver your outcomes more broadly.
David? Thanks, Louise. David?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not an expert in how you get funding for projects. We're very fortunate to have a really great team at Breast Cancer Now that support us to do that, and also fortunate that the People's Postcode Lottery were able to support our particular digital unification project, but also slightly challenge the mindset that doing digital transformation work isn't directly having an impact on your beneficiaries. So I would challenge the thinking that you can't use donations for the organisation that aren't restricted to a certain project for this type of work. I think it really has a huge impact, and that is the whole point of digital transformation, is to increase the impact you're having for your beneficiaries.
Thank you, David. Now, what if your staff are just not bought in to digital transformation? They don't want to engage and they aren't interested in joining digital transformation learning teams. Tricky one. What does anyone think about that? I mean, I don't suppose you've had that experience, David, but I don't know if Louise or Zoe might have seen that happen, or David, did you have you had that kind of challenge? Who should we go to? Zoe, are you able to share some insights there?
Yeah, sure. I think I'd want to know what the underlying beliefs and behaviours are there. What's behind that reticence? So is it to do with people who are just nervous about change? Are they lacking confidence in technology? Do they need support with skills? So what I would do is I would try and break it down. I would talk to some of these people one-to-one. I think it's important it's done in quite a gentle way. So perhaps saying, look, I notice you're a little bit reserved, a bit reluctant to join this. I'd love to understand a bit more about this. So that then you can work out what the problem is and how you can support people on that. I think anything involving the word digital, people sometimes get very nervous about it. So the more you can frame this in the context of this is our organisation trying to change and evolve and future-proof and be sustainable at a time when resources are really tight, rather than this is about doing technology better, that might be a bit more of an accessible way in for people who may be a bit nervous about tech and digital and data.
Thanks, Zoe. David, did you have any experiences to share or any learnings on that?
No, I think Zoe really nailed it on the head there. It's about understanding what are the worries and the reluctance. Where is that coming from? And really working with the staff to reassure them that it's not about replacing them with digital processes, and it's not about fundamentally changing the organizations in terms of the vision and the impact. It's about the impact of the work that you can do to support the beneficiaries, and I think that's the way around to sell it.
Brilliant, thank you, David. Now we've got a question here. I've heard people talk about how leaders need to understand digital like they understand other areas of the business. So what are the fundamentals that leaders need to understand? Louise, do you have any tips there or any insights?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we talk a lot with kind of leaders, and it's less about sort of digital and technology, more around the concept of being a modern, responsive organisation, and actually how digital and technology can really enable and empower you to deliver against your organisational goals. So it's around sort of decoupling it as being this sort of like separate thing, and actually it's part of a bigger concept of how they can sort of be an organisation that can flex with the needs of the sector, of the market, can adapt to changes in audience needs and behaviours, and so kind of really helping them on the journey of the power of what is possible, and also connecting that right back to the vision and the mission, because ultimately, when we're talking about leaders, we're talking about leaders who have accountability within organisation. There's a huge amount of pressure on their shoulders and responsibility to deliver against a strategy, and actually it's sort of showing the journey and how digital and technology can be a key part of actually getting them closer to achieving those goals.
Great, thank you, Louise. And interestingly, someone has commented from a charity that they answered that they were delivering a plan on the poll, but the reality is we are doing digital transformation without a plan. So that was quite interesting. She says, I've steered us away from using digital transformation as a term, as it's been a bit of a buzzword that I don't think would get traction with other parts of our charity. So that was quite interesting on your point, Louise, there, what you were talking about in terms of the buzzword as well. Great. Someone else, another question come through. So this is more of a comment, actually. Apprenticeship programs are a great way to upskill and develop across the workforce and increase data literacy and confidence. This is all about the skills and learning. For instance, the Level 3 Data Professional Programme supports to unify how organisations report and optimise their data, as well as empowering learners to use data to inform decision making. It would be great to see more organisations utilise these levy-funded programmes to support their transformation goals and ambitions. We have another comment through. We're a small organisation constantly firefighting, and therefore we know it will help in the long term, but in the short term, never gets on the priority list. Without a superhero coming in to rescue us free of charge, it just keeps getting kicked back. That said, they're going to down tools for 3 weeks in October to focus on an internal strategy. So if someone wants to volunteer to work with us on a plan, I will snap you up. Yeah, so quite a lot of people sort of sharing their experiences, which is lovely. Now, I think this is quite a nice one to finish up on. If charities could only make one big change in how they transform themselves, what would you suggest they focus on? Should we go around the panel and each of you give us your one big change to transform? Louise, would you like to start us off there?
Sure. Gosh, well, I think the sort of transformation thread runs right through to being super clear on the outcomes that you're actually trying to deliver against, because they become the anchor to your decision making, how you prioritize. And so for me, kind of bringing together an organization, a leadership team who can drive forward on an outcomes-based strategy is super important, because with that then you can start to make really great decisions. You can have data, you can have digital, you can have audiences that are at the heart of all of those things. And I guess to the CEO who's looking at the firefighting and thinking about making their org strategy, like it's the thing that is the hardest to do, but if you invest the time and resources into doing that brings alignment across the organization. It means that your teams have clarity, and having been through such an uncertain time in the last couple of years, whilst we can't say for certain X is going to happen or Y we need to focus on, but what we can give them is real clarity is really important.
Great, thank you, Louise. Zoe?
So today we talked about some of those hygiene factors we need in digital transformation, like being user-led and being evidence-led. I think the one thing I'd love to see more charities do is to take a really inclusive approach. So whether that's testing products and services with a diverse range of users, whether that's having diverse skills on your digital team, diversity on your board as well. That's the number one thing I'd really love to see in all organisations. Otherwise, I think there is a risk of recreating some of those systemic inequalities.
Thank you, Zoe. And David, what's your one big area to focus on?
I think, like the others have mentioned, talking to your users and doing the user research to make sure you're focusing on and investing in the areas and the problems that need to be solved from their perspective. And then once you've agreed the focus, as I mentioned in our project, the experience principles, you've really got to keep those in mind through every decision that you make, and keep referring back to them and making sure that they are underpinning the decisions that you make, rather than simply saying you're user-led and doing a bit of research but then carrying on as normal. You've really got to keep challenging yourself and revisiting those to make sure that you're sticking to the vision.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, David. I'm afraid we will have to draw today's webinar to a close. It will be available on demand though, so you can watch again, and please feel free to share with your colleagues or play it back later to catch up on anything you missed out on. I would like to say a huge thank you to Zoe, David and Louise for taking the time to share your thoughts today, for a really fascinating discussion. Do connect with them on LinkedIn or Twitter if you've got any sort of specific additional questions for them. So reach out on LinkedIn or Twitter. I've got their Twitter handles for you as well. So it's at atypicaldavid for David, at Louise Lai UK, that's LOULAI UK for Louise, and at Zoe Amar, Zoe AMAR for Zoe. If you have any further questions, and thank you again to TPXimpact for partnering with us on this webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.